giving them paperback books to keep along with, and as they would leave their visit. And I remember one of the doctors asked why I was there, because we're giving the books away. And I said, well, you hope that the family will say, this is a good thing, but we're talking about low-income families. They're not going to be able to, there are not a lot of bookstores in their communities. They're not going to be able to go and buy books. Where will they go? They will come to the public library if this takes. So we really need to be here to know that that's the direction, so that when families come in, they feel welcome, that we expect them, so.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, because I was thinking about that the other day. So I'm going to talk with someone from Reach Out and Read.
That was the program.
Yes. And I was thinking, some of the barriers to the Reach Out and Read program, so it's not in the background. Some of the barriers to the Reach Out and Read program have been, I think, the cost of books, right? And I had an opportunity, I spoke with Dr. Diane Johnson-Feelings last week. I was at the Richland Library there in Columbia, South Carolina. And they have like these, and probably the same here too, they have like book bags already ready to go with books.
Right, we've had a number of programs like that, yes.
And one thought I had, and I don't know if it has happened yet, for the fact that, could a pediatrician's office partner with the library so that the library could provide those books, right? Since a lot of communities, library cards are kind of already, you don't have to worry about signing up.
Right.
You just show up because of your school ID. Could those packets of books already be, deployed in the pediatrician's office? So, and then that, a lot of places aren't doing fines anymore.
Right. And then the families could return them whenever it's convenient.
So that was like an idea. I was thinking, oh, that would be great. It would be interesting to know if other people did that. But I think, like, you talked about, this tie-in of books to health, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's so important because I think that, especially when people are stressed and, being working class and being low income in this country is so stressful. And especially, if somebody gets sick and they're at the doctor's office or just making the regular appointments. So to have this kind of connection to when you go home, especially if the young person is sick, or this is something to think about or to follow up on, and if they're really good curated collections of books that speak to that particular child or that environment, or encouraging that child in that environment, I think it makes a big impact on the child's mental health, the family connection. This idea that, putting the seed in there that you're also a part of their education. You're not, just someone on the outside looking in when they go to school. I think that's has the opportunity to be a tremendous impact on a healthy experience, because we know we're mind, body, and spirit, and all of these things need to work together.
I totally agree. So let's start.
Okay.
If you can share first your name and your roles that you've had connected to children's literature.
My name is Deborah Taylor. For 44 years plus, I worked at the Enoch Pratt Free Library before I retired. And for most of that time, my work was with young adults, teenagers. But I also headed up for about 20 years our Office of School and Student Services, which was our connection to schools, public, private, homeschoolers, all of the aspects of education. So that kind of gave me a K-12 focus, in addition to my primary focus being teenagers.
So let's talk a little bit about what drew you to working with teens? Was it an evolution, or was it like an aha moment that said I want to work with teens?
It's interesting because I did an internship. There used to be a program called Urban Core, and I was an Urban Core student when I was in college, and my assignment was to the public library, and they happened to place me in the administrator's office who administrated teen services. So I immediately felt a connection. Plus I had grown up as a teenager in the Pratt Library, using this library, and I felt that was an age group I could connect with. I knew that was an important reading time for me, and I really thought that I could have an impact on the young people of that age group that came into the library.
So you said you grew up, I guess, in the Baltimore area.
I grew up here in Baltimore. I went to Western High School, which was an all-girls academic high school, and excuse me, and books and reading were an important part of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And the library, for a couple of those years, Western High School was actually downtown. So the Central Library, this library, was nearby. It was a library that I used. I also used the Edmondson Avenue branch in my neighborhood. And I remember that the teen years of reading were very important to me. So that was why I chose to work with teens.
So when you were coming up, right, even as a professional, were there a lot of books available to you that were written by or for African American children or teens?
No, there were not very many. I was very fortunate that when I did come back to work here, not in an internship, but as a professional, I came back part-time. We were starting to see a few more books, and we were also using some books from the adult collection that would resonate with teens, but the pickings were very slim, and there were very few books that spoke to, especially the urban experience that many of our young people were walking in the door. I think we had this kind of period where we were trying to reach the kids in our communities, but we had very few tools to reach them. And so we used our programming, we used encouragement of them, we used opportunities for them to use other materials as ways to try and encourage them to be library users. I think we knew that information was power. I mean, it was the late 60s, early 70s. So information as power was what we were really working with. And we wanted young people to be informed. We wanted them to be informed about their rights. We wanted them to be informed about their opportunities. So that was really the hook. But we did not have a lot of books with them, with their experiences. We tried to use the few that we had effectively, but we had very limited tools.
So in your work, how do you think you helped make that change?
Well, I was active professionally in the American Library Association, and we had an opportunity to meet with authors and publishers and to encourage more of those books. We also tried to provide opportunities for those authors to come to our library so that they would be more visible. And we advocated for more books. We tried to emphasize, there was so much we didn't know, though. We didn't know about decisions behind the scenes, about how many copies got published. We didn't know about marketing budgets. We did not know we were working at such a disadvantage. But the more involved we got, the more we began to be aware of that. So we began to do whatever we could and to encourage the few writers that we had so that they would continue, because it had to be discouraging for them to be the one or two, African American writers writing for this age group, and they could see all of their colleagues from other communities just getting these big budgets and getting marketing budgets, getting big contracts, and they were not. Even though the country was changing, the demographics were changing, it took a long time for publishing, and it still hasn't totally caught up, but it took a long time.
So if you could think of like maybe one or two efforts that you think really sort of changed the needle.
I think a few things changed the needle. This is a question I get asked. I don't think it was any one thing. I think there was a confluence of factors. I think the changing demographics. You got more people of color coming in schools and at a particular age range. That was a big factor. I think the rise of social media was a big factor. People could talk about it more. Writers could connect with their audiences more. I think there was also, excuse me, I think there was also a change in the idea that that white kids would only read books about white kids, and black kids would only read books about black kids. I think we began to see some much more crossover, even though we'd had crossover in music and other forms of entertainment for years. I think books were the last in that area of arts to change. So we saw a little bit of change in that. It's also generational. Think about the Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, for example. 25 years old. And so the young people who would have read that book are now teachers and librarians. And so they also read Roll of Thunder when they were in school. So they began to be a little bit more at ease, I think, with a variety of stories. So I think that was a change. I think the efforts of professionals to all the advocacy also contributed. So I think there were a number of factors that kind of worked together to bring more awareness and also to recognize that it was possible for publishers to make money in publishing books with a variety of stories.
That's interesting. I think the one thing that I hadn't really factored in terms of the publishing industry or books in general, right, is that the amount of books that are purchased by schools and libraries, right? So I'm just wondering, in terms of that sort of leverage, right? Your role in the American Library Association, or even with committees, how do you think that may have even helped even more, right? Do you think it's still those confluence of things, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's still all of those factors. Okay. I think some of the committees, particularly like the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, Pura Belpré for Latino books, I think all of those areas, those awards were also ways of advocating. They were ways of bringing books to the forefront, and writers and illustrators to the forefront. And I think they contributed a lot. I also think the efforts from ALA in general and in the children's and young adult divisions to deal more with equity and to deal more with the changing demographic also contributed to it as well.
So for you, are there a few unsung heroes in your field that you think made an impact on advocating for books, besides yourself?
Well, I don't think they might be unsung to the general population. I think those of us in the field know the people who have been working and striving. I think about people like Dr. Pauletta Bracey, who was at North Carolina Central University, who was a strong advocate for Black children's books. So much so, Christopher Paul Curtis made her a character in one of his books as a librarian. I think about Henrietta Smith, who recently passed away, who was a strong advocate for promoting the books and for the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, worked with the early founders to do that work. I think about right now, Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, Dr. Thomas, who is still writing and active in social media, writing about the need for the speculative fiction that reflects people of color as well. So I think that there are a few people who really have worked for a very long time and continue to write and speak about the need for these books and how important they are.
So for yourself, given your breadth of experience, what things have you noticed that have changed over time regarding the collection of books? I mean, I know they've gotten more, but in terms of, at one time were the books just segregated, like, this is the African American books, Latin American books, and now they're all together,
I think we have, that was a question that we always talked about a lot in libraries. Most of us were trained as librarians, so we're trained to categorize the books by where the books go. That's not the way the public comes into the library, and that's not the way the public uses our collections. They want to know, where are the books that I'm interested in? If I'm interested in African American books, and finally I can read books about my life and my story, where are they? I don't want to have to plow through everything else. So we would use displays. we would use ways of highlighting the books, but also making sure that they would be integrated as regular part of the collection. So you're always torn between how do you market it for the walk-in public who's looking for that story, and make sure that you maintain the integrity of your collection, which is a fully integrated collection, and books are, where they're supposed to be by their categories. So that means that you have to be mindful about the way you promote the books in your buildings, but you're constantly looking for those stories. I think another big change to me has been the growth of the genre. For a while you had historical books about the African American experience. There were so many books about the rural or the downtrodden, so to speak. There were very few books about Black kids just going about their lives, doing what all kids do, but having that experience through the lens of having grown up in the Black community. We're seeing more of that. We're seeing more books of fantasy. We're actually seeing more fantasy that's drawing from the African experience. When you think about a book like Children of Blood and Bone, which grew from Nigerian stories. So we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more mysteries, which reflect, what that whole experience is like. So having the full range is really one of the changes, not just one or two types of stories being told over and over again.
So have you ever written?
Fiction?
Yeah, fiction or nonfiction?
I have written, chapters
Okay.
in books. I wrote a chapter about books in the DeGrumman collection, which is an important collection of historical children's books. I wrote about the Black experience there. I've written articles. When I was chair of Coretta Scott King for the 40th anniversary, I think I wrote an article a week for a while for whatever outlet we could find to promote the book awards. So it's mostly been that kind of writing, more critique, more speaking about trends, that kind of thing.
Ever any interest in creative writing?
That's not my bent. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. I love to write about it, and but I've never really had any kind of strong urge to make up a story and tell it, other than when I read a book and I think this should have ended differently, and I dream up a different ending. But no, that's not something that I thought I was talented in. I have such admiration for it, but no.
So, you talked about your love of books and just loving the Pratt Library when you were younger, right? Were there any books like for you that resonated with you that okay, that you just loved to read?
I didn't discover the African American experience in books until high school.
Yeah.
There were only, a few from the 40s and 50s, and many of the books that had African American characters in the 40s, 50s, and 60s were, they were foreign. They were written by mostly whites. They were not really indicative of an experience that I recognized. They were mostly there for effect or some kind of moral uplift for the white character. So I didn't discover those books until I got to high school. And I think I read Man, Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown, like so many other kids of the 60s and late 60s, early 70s. And when I got to college, I discovered Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and I think that probably had the biggest effect on me. I used to joke that I could always find some aspect of something to write about. And then I realized, the critique of books was really important to understand how they impacted you. How did the writer do that? How did the writer make me stop and question something? So I was interested in that part of the reading experience, that kind of exchange between the writer and the reader. So yeah, those were the books I think that that had a really big impact on me. And of course, then reading Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, The Bluest Eye. Those were the books when I was a young professional that really opened my eyes. I started off as a history major, so I read a lot of history, a lot of African American history, a lot of early American history. And I've watched the evolution of that over time. I'm still interested in that over time.
So we have like similar. So I grew up in the '70s. So I was born in 1970. So '70s and '80s. I think the same for me. I wasn't exposed to books by African American authors until high school, maybe middle school, high school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But then I think my dad was very much like, you had to read up. So
right.
We read like adult books.
Yes.
So it's like, even though Black Like Me wasn't, but it was.
Mm-hmm.
I read that book. I read, Miseducation of the Negro, right? Frederick,
Mm-hmm.
some a lot of it historical. And then I don't think I read fiction until college either, right? So I had a Black Lit class.
Right.
And then I don't know, one summer I picked up The Bluest Eye, and the person was in a pre-med program. She's like, "You want to read that this summer? Don't you want to relax?" I was like, but it was very insightful. But it had me thinking, right? It's like, hopefully kids now, right? Even my kids, but I think because my kids are now 19 and 20, 23.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I still found it difficult to find books for them, right? Because I'm thinking, I don't think I introduced them to a book till middle school, because of maybe I just wasn't looking for them, or I just didn't find them.
I think it was for that. I'm thinking about that time frame because I was a professional librarian at that time. There were not a lot of books around, and even picture books. When you think about introducing kids to books, I remember, my kids were born in the late 70s, early 80s, and I remember buying books about warm, fuzzy brown animals because I couldn't find picture books that showed little Black kids.
That's right. Well, I read Berenstain Bears.
Of course, my kids adored them.
Yeah.
And so, you were constantly trying to do that thing where you weren't just giving them, because the media was giving them lots of princesses, lots of blonde, blue-eyed princesses. And you were trying to find ways that you gave them something else. You really can't just tell kids, oh, you shouldn't like that because it doesn't look like you. That is really not. Kids will just go internal. Mm-hmm. It will just send them internal. They will take their likes and dislikes off stage. You really just have to constantly give them lots of things and lots of opportunities to talk about the books that they've seen and that they've read. So yeah, I think there was still, there's still very few even at that point. So it's not surprising that you wouldn't have had many books to introduce your kids to. There was a publishing couple, Wade and Cheryl Hudson, who were in charge, who started the business Just Us Books, and they had Afro Bets, and they had Bright Eyes, Brown Skin, and just books like that you started to see and you could buy as a parent and put in the hands of your kids.
Sorry, so now I don't feel so guilty.
No, you didn't have a lot around you, and if you weren't in the field, where would you find it if you weren't constantly looking for it? That's what we did. Yeah. We were constantly looking for it. We were constantly trying to keep up with it. We were scouring the professional journals, looking for announcements. But if a parent is not doing that, so they're looking at what they can pick up when they're in the toy store or when they're in the library, and if it's not a lot of it around, they might miss it.
So I think that goes back to the power of you as a librarian, right? Your field, right? And curating these collections and displaying them, because again, it's true. Like I'm thinking, if I only see the spine, right? I don't know. And I guess it's okay. There's some like democracy to that, right? It's like, okay, it could be anywhere, but you're still looking for it.
And if you're busy and you're coming into the library after work, you've picked up kids, you've got hungry kids, you've got dinner to fix, you need to have things around and in your eyesight. And I think libraries were aware of that and tried to display things so that people could see them, they could be there. They wouldn't have to always wait until a librarian could do that kind of careful reader's advisory. You're coming in there, so maybe somebody's got a project on frogs. You've got to get a few nonfiction books that they can do their homework or do their project. And so you want things that are available for people to, for it to catch their eye. So those are all considerations that you make when you're working in the field, so that you make it as easy for parents to find these books as possible.
And that I totally appreciate, because even nowadays, there are lists, right, that are available, maybe even certain times of the year, right?
Right.
During celebrations.
Especially for summer reading, things like that.
So which I think is so important. And then so I'm going to go back to this idea of teenage years. So one of my colleagues, she's a pediatrician, adolescent doctor at Johns Hopkins. I don't know if you've met Dr. Maria Trent.
No, I haven't.
So she's she's great. So she's a professor now at Hopkins, but she still works at the Harriet Lane Clinic. And with her husband, and then with her husband's friends, because her husband, it's not the same last name. I forget his name. I should know his name. He worked at Howard University, and he had friends, and he helped her curate a list of books, right? An actual library within the Harriet Lane Clinic.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that they could give books to teenagers, right? Because again, like a lot of the work that we do as pediatricians is really focusing on early childhood literacy, 0 to 5, right?
Right.
And the power that you have at those pivotal ages of middle school and high school, where you hear a lot of, and you realize statistics that's when they drop off, right? The interest in reading. And I'm just curious, like, how do you, with the teens that you worked with, or even just seeing patrons come in, what that difference means to them when they see books that they can relate to, right? Or just, I don't know, it's just an exciting topic or something, just something that they might like.
Oh, I think it's so important. The library did a number of programs that were focused on that age group in particular. And right now they're doing a one book Baltimore, where all 7th and 8th graders get to get a copy and get to read the same book. And they bring in the writer and they do programming, and they encourage the whole community to read the book, not just the kids themselves, but adults and parents and teachers and anyone who works with kids and is interested in keeping kids safe. And so even before that project, which is going on now, we had a one book Baltimore that we did, and we would bring in writers. I remember being in Central Hall with maybe about 500 kids, chairs all the way to the back, and Christopher Paul Curtis reading The Watsons Go to Birmingham, and all the kids had their copy. And you could hear the pages turn together. It was such a powerful moment, because he was funny, and the characters was a strong Black family. They were taking a trip south, which some of the kids could relate to because they'd had that experience, or their parents had told them about those experiences. So there was a way to to connect with them around those stories. But I also know that Black kids they go to all the superhero movies. There was a reason the Black Panther resonated with so many, not just Black kids, but across ages. They wanted to see the superheroes. So making sure that you look for those books and you have those books and you make those available. I know so many adults who said when they were teenagers, Black adults, they loved the Lord of the Rings series. You're finding stories that resonate like those. That is critical for adolescents. And also finding the things that kids are interested in. Are you interested in cheerleading? Do you want to write your own rap music? Not just stories, but also, do you want to create? That's the time of life where you're figuring out who you are, what you like, what floats your boat, as they say. You want to figure that out. And so having books that reflect all of that. Do you want to be a fashion designer? Do you want to draw comics? So making sure that all of those things are part of an adolescent's experience, and not just this narrow idea that if you're reading fiction, are you engaging with text?
Yeah, I'm starting to realize how much of a godsend libraries are, right? Because I think my experiences lately are they serve multiple purposes. Like when I came into the library, I saw this, you know, meet with a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
You can earn
Mm-hmm.
your a graduate, your high school degree,
Exactly.
business certificate, and it's like, well, you know, it's almost like the books are here, but then how do you capture people? You know, how do you find a place
Right.
that really allows a universal access to, and it's free, right? So, which I think is marvelous.
And I think, you know, the libraries have evolved over years to figure out what do their communities need and want from them. But it's all under the umbrella of information, of access, of engaging with the world in that way. It's just that it's got multiple ways of doing that. And I think that was one of the things that kind of brought teens back into libraries when the computers arrived. Kids who didn't think there was anything in the library for them were attracted by this new technology. And so it kind of brought them back, and it gave us a way in. Now it took some time to figure out how do you balance it. You know, all they want to do is sit on the computer all day. Well, what do you do that make them that will intrigue them, that will interest them? In addition to that, I mean, many of us spend a lot of time on screens, adults, not just kids. But so you have to figure out ways that will show them that they want a balance. You know, the successful people have a balance. They use screens when they need to. They use printed books when they need to. They just know you move seamlessly through all of these things. And that's what I always wanted for the young people who use the Pratt, to feel that I use what I want to use, I read what I want to read when, you know, at any appropriate time for me. And so, but I'm comfortable with all of it.
So do the teens, or had the teens had an opportunity to have input on the types of books, types of things they'd like to see and read about?
Oh yes, one of the things that we developed kind of teen advisory boards over the years, different internship programs where you had groups of teens working in branches, helping out, and that you could ask them, you know, what they were interested in. You know, you could have those opportunities for open mic, for kids to give you input. We had a charrette when they planned the teen space, and we had kids from couple of the local schools, kind of kids who walk in, and they gave us their thoughts on what should be in that room and what kinds of activities, in addition to the materials, should go on in that room.
Awesome. So, would love to touch on your work, your other work in terms of advocating for diverse books, right? Your participation in like the Coretta Scott King Awards, also Newbery, correct?
Yes, I served on the Newbery Committee. We're about to, and I think it's in 2022, we will celebrate our 20th anniversary. We still are in connection. The Newbery experience is very intimate. You become really close friends because you're all reading these books and discussing them. And so, yeah, it was a great experience. I was on the National Book Award jury a few years back, so I've had a great opportunity throughout my career to serve on various committees, to honor books, individuals, all of those things.
So, again, I think I've spoken to other people, right? Some of the value of having awards, right? And having the gold sticker, right?
Oh, it's a big deal.
You know, and so I want to talk a little bit about you know why I think I know why it is a big deal, right? Because I mean, you always want to be recognized, right? You know, you were in this, you were nominated, right? So then that gives you some cachet, right? It gives you some prominence. But so with so I guess going back to Coretta Scott King, were those the first awards that were developed specifically for Black books?
Yes.
Okay. And then
they, in fact, just a couple of years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, and they really kind of were trailblazing in that, you know, the Pure Belt Prey and the awards for American Indian books, all of those things came after. They kind of set the standard. They struggled because it was kind of seen as, it's not as prestigious. But I think the prestige grew because very often people that had been recognized with Coretta Scott King Book Awards then went on to win other awards, to be recognized. They won Newberries, they won Caldecott's, or they became um, writers and illustrators that were very well received, very well reviewed. And it was like the Coretta Scott King Book Awards introduced them to the field, gave them a bit of visibility. And so I think the recipients really helped to raise the prestige of the awards.
And do you also think that influence as well, like who was on the committees of these other national book awards?
Yes, yes. The Coretta Scott King Book Awards has it written in their bylaws that the committee is multiracial to reflect, the work of Dr. King, and it was named after his widow for her continuing his legacy. I think what happens is that we recognize that you bring different life experiences to reading. Reading is highly personal, no matter how much you've been trained, and you can separate a little bit, because of your training, from what you actually like and what speaks to you from, the quality and the qualities that a piece of literature might bring to a reader. But we all come at it from different perspectives. And the more perspectives you have, the more you are going to have a richer discussion about the value of the book and its potential to connect and to be the most distinguished for young people in any given year. So I think that's one of the things that has influenced the committees trying to have multiple perspectives on all committees as much as you can.
Yeah, like in many instances, right? That's like you said, that is trailblazing in its own regards, because
Yes.
there's still so many other organizations that struggle with that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is, there are these ideas that standards were kind of handed down like Moses and the tablets. Standards are made up by people. People decided what was literary. People decided what was good based on their own experiences, heavily influenced by Western literary tradition. People used to tell us all the time, this is a great example. People would say, oh, it's too didactic. Well, books that taught, stories that teach a lesson were a significant part of the African American experience. They were a significant part of the oral tradition, stories that taught a lesson. So if you come from a background where stories were supposed to teach a lesson, they were supposed to help you understand the world, and then someone says, no, that's too didactic. It needs to be art for art's sake, type of Western, perspective. You will never feel that these books meet that standard. So you need people to talk about their experience to show that no, this is important for these readers, to have that. Now, we can argue about how well someone does that. Can they do it in a seamless way? Can they do it without making it so obvious that it's not, it doesn't serve the story? We can argue about all of that, but you can't say didacticism or books that teach a lesson are automatically disqualified from being distinguished. So you see what I'm saying? That brings a different perspective to an understanding of how you judge, how you weigh what is distinguished, what meets high literary standard.
Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine. I don't necessarily want to see the sausage being made of a book process.
Yes,
but there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yes. Man, I think you've answered a lot of my questions.
Oh, good.
I guess maybe my last little questions are there organizations that people should know about that have had a historical influence on Black children's literature? I mean, we talked about the awards. Are there any other organizations you think
Well,
that
I
played a
don't
part
not
in
so much historically. I mean, they're relatively new. We Need Diverse Books has had a tremendous impact, especially because it started off as a hashtag as part of social media. And because they began to kind of look behind. We just talked about how does the process. They recognized that this was not just one small factor. That writers of color needed support. That the publishing field was primarily white and female, who all came from very similar backgrounds because the pay was so low, and who could afford, after they spent so much money on a college education, go to work for publishing and still pay their school loans back. That they recognized that they wanted paid internships. So there were so many things behind the scenes that they recognized, in addition to giving awards for diverse books, for giving opportunities for mentorship. They knew that there was more to it than, okay, we just need to sign a few more Black or Latino writers. So I think that they had a really strong impact, probably because the people who helped found it were creators from various backgrounds, creators of color from various backgrounds. And so they recognized all the different components that might serve as a barrier to improving what was available for readers to be out there. And I think that there are more academics. Some of the folks that were working on the panel with you who are writing about this and who have really dug deeply into, what are the components, what are some of the reasons why we don't see this significant change. The Cooperative Center for Children's Books and the University of Wisconsin, that they really, because they do the statistics, they keep track of the statistics, and they can tell you about the growth or the incremental growth, or the fact that there are more books about trucks than there are books about people of color. Those kinds of things. That's important information and data. Certainly, individuals like Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, and everybody quotes her now with windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors, finally giving her, her credit. But these are people who all of these things have contributed to the field, to giving us the language, the ways of thinking about it and talking about it.
So my last question is, what do you think is next?
What do I think is next? Oh, that's a really good question. I think what is next is we will continue to see pressure from various communities. Now we're seeing the backlash. You get people banning a book like New Kid, which has got to be the most innocuous book about a kid, a Black kid in a primarily white school, writing about his experiences. We're starting to see the backlash, and so I think what we should see next, what we need, is for people to be vigilant. We need for people to be kind of figuring out ways to coalesce, making sure that these books, the little bit of progress we made, it's not turned back. It's kind of American history that you make a little bit of progress and then you get some, you make some steps backward. It's just been a fact of this country's history. And we have to kind of support each other, support the folks that are doing the work, because I think we're in a period of retrenchment right now. And, Texas is one of the largest, has the largest school districts, and very often how they go, so goes the rest of publishing, because they purchase so many books, so many textbooks. I think we just have to be more vigilant. And I think that's where we are right now. We're kind of in a period of retrenchment. Fortunately, people did rally. Jerry Craft will go to Texas, or will do his virtual visit, and the books have been put back. But I mean, that's so indicative of what you make a little bit of progress. So you really can't make continual progress because you have to fight the same battles so often, and I think that can be discouraging. But I think we know, sometimes if you know what you're up against, you can develop strategies to deal with it.
What I'm hoping is that, libraries still continue to be strategies, because, I mean, as of now, I haven't heard any backlash from the public about books that libraries have.
Usually usually they start with schools.
Yeah.
Because people are very emotional
Mhm.
and
Okay,
romantic
yeah,
about
yeah,
schools,
yeah.
and so it's easier to make those changes there. Very often it takes a while, and very often it will not. But if they do it in schools, then you can develop a fear, so that you get the silent censorship. People just don't buy the books, so that nobody will challenge them, and that's always an issue, because how will you know if you just don't purchase the books? So I think many libraries, though, are ready, and we're going to have diverse collections because that's who's coming in our doors. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit harder to make to kind of drive those books out of public libraries, because schools are mandatory and all of those. They can make those kinds of pushes, and they can generate enough fear in the hearts of parents, because that's our biggest fear, right? That our kids won't get a good education, that something will interfere there, and people can tie a lot of things to that fear.
So I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about this.
Yes, that was awesome.